maybe I'm too close to that. So I'm gonna try to be over here. Shut that off. Oh, it's that one. Okay, good. So, why are we coming here today? So, we have, and a lot of people don't know this, there's a hierarchy of rules and regulations for the HOA. And I'll use an analogy to explain it better, but there's a thing called Declaration of Restrictive and Protective Covenants. That is this super high law for Lakeridge. Now, most people think the laws are based on bylaws, which is the next level down. After that, we have rules and regulations, we'll say, like from ARC or from the grounds. The problem is, over a course of time, and considering we're open 29 years here, a lot of these things have not been looked at for 29 years, and things change. So if we go to change something in the ARC standard, and it does not coincide with the restrictive covenant, you got a problem. So we start at the top, and it's sort of like, and our lawyers gave me this, there are township laws, then there are county laws, and all of that is superseded by state law. If the state law changes, you fall in line county, you fall in line township. So it's the same thing. So we have to make sure we go back to the highest level of law for Lakeridge and make sure that everything filters down. So we have, originally it was 10 items that we were going to ask the community to vote on, because these restrictive things require all of us voting on before it can be changed. That's a good thing. Now, the really good thing is if people vote. Because if you don't get enough people voting, you don't reach what's called a quorum. And a quorum is what makes it legally okay to proceed, that you have enough participation. So if you never reach quorum, nothing gets accomplished. So that's another very key point. So I would ask that you talk it up and everyone vote, because your vote is what determines where we go. Not the board, not the lawyers, our vote. And I always joke, in my house, I don't even get a vote. My wife doesn't. All right? But every household needs to vote, because the quorum is 50% of the total population. So if you take half of 926, if we don't hit that quorum number, absolutely nothing happens. So it's very important that people vote. Now, originally, and there was just a brief discussion now, we had 10 items from last night that we thought we wanted the community to vote on. And after deliberation, there's a statement about a sponsor. A sponsor was the person who sold the original houses, Coates. So we were going to change 2 items in these high-level laws, restrictive laws. And then we decided, you know what, there's too many times that sponsor is mentioned throughout the document, and to change each one and have you vote on each one would be silly. And they really don't change anything. So a general statement is going to at some point be made that it is understood that the sponsor, Coates, is long gone. Okay, so it looks like today we've come to a consensus, and I'm looking over at the guys that we discussed it this morning, that there'll be only 8 things to vote on. Now, the key thing here is there are 8 things, and you vote on each one, independent of each other. So it's not an all or nothing deal. If you like 3 and you don't like 5, that's fine. If you like 5, you don't like 3, that's fine. Just vote, and your opinion counts. Okay, so that's about all I'm going to do is a lead in here. Hi.
When you refer to sponsor, are you saying that it's Coates?
Yes. The original.
You want to eliminate him?
Well, at some point, but first off, Coates is irrelevant at this point. Let's be honest. originally Coates was in there as the sponsor when he said things like, has he advertised, or the original fences that were up in this development, the split rail fences. You know, he had a say in all that, but that stuff's been up forever. His involvement in the HOA community today, our community, is nothing. So yes, when we say sponsor, we're referring to Coates, and it really has no bearing anymore. And in fact, the lawyer said, you don't really have to change it. It's an understood thing that was 28 years ago. And when he sold his last lot, the last house, he was done. And after that, totally free and clear from this environment. And in our eyes, he has no bearing in it anymore. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay, if not, you can get me later. All right? So, the last thing that I want to do before I turned it over to our attorney is I wanted to thank the committee, and Steve Agresta is here. Steve headed up this committee and undertook going through the restrictive covenant and coming up with the changes. Now I'm going to tell you, we've been trying to do this probably for about 3 years. And it started with our old attorney, and we didn't get any traction with that. And now we have a new attorney, and we got immediate traction. And now we're moving forward. So we will, in the near future, hopefully within a week's time, where's Ray? It's right here. Hopefully in a week's time or 10 days, what we decide on about putting into a vote will be out there for you to vote on. And like I said, we have to reach quorum. All right? Listen, you can't do anything without a committee with people that invest their time and their knowledge. And in this case, this committee that was put together, and you can call it an ad hoc committee, call it whatever you want, and the board sponsored them, of course. They did all the work, and it took hours and hours and hours. So I'd like to thank them for that. All right, I'm queuing you up. All right. So I'm going to stop talking, which is very hard for me. I'm going to go sit over there. But if there's any help or that the board can give, we'll jump in to assist in the conversation, okay? Thank you all.
Can you hear me okay? Hello everybody, my name is Mike Blulak. I am an attorney at McGovern Legal Services, the association's law firm. And as Mike had mentioned, we will talk about the proposed amendments to your declaration of restrictive covenants. And let me just clarify for everybody the difference between bylaws and your declaration of covenants and restrictions, and then rules and regulations. So the way all community associations and homeowner associations are set up, you have really two sets of governing documents. You have your bylaws and your declaration. Bylaws pertain to corporate governance, what the board does, what the members do, you know, what is needed to attain quorum, so on and so forth. And then you have your declaration of property rights and restrictions, your declaration, excuse me, of covenants and restrictions, and that pertains to your property rights and your property restrictions. Who owns what, who can take care of what, who takes care of the roofs, who mows the lawn. A lot of those issues are addressed directly in your declaration. And that is what we're going to talk about proposing to amend. Like Mike mentioned, there was initially 10 amendments. We're not going to address the sponsor issues. They're really not that relevant. So we'll talk about the other 8 amendments that are being proposed. In order for these amendments to pass, once everything is finalized, and we're talking about this today to take into account membership feedback, and then any final changes will be made to the proposed amendments. They will then be mailed out to all of the members along with a ballot. And now, in order for the amendments to pass, at least half of the membership needs to participate in the vote so that you obtain quorum, because this would be a membership action. In order for the members to act, the members must reach quorum. So at least half of the members participate, and then of all of the votes submitted, you will need an affirmative vote by at least 2/3 of the members. All right, so let's say 500 people submit ballots, you've now attained quorum, now you'll need 2/3 of 500, whatever that number is, to approve the amendments. And like Mike had mentioned, each amendment will be listed separately. All right, so you can agree with 2 and want to vote down the other 6 or vice versa, however you want to vote. All right, so we'll go through the amendments now, and feel free to ask questions as we go through. The first amendment we'll talk about is listed as number 2 here. It's Article 3, Section 4D, D as in dog. This amendment pertains to rental restrictions. I'll go through and explain what you currently have. A lot of the language we have here, by the way, we're proposing to delete what you currently have and institute all of this new language. A lot of it is redundant with what you have, other than it's cleaning it up, making it a little more tight and enforceable. If you ever find yourself in court and you have to defend or pursue somebody who's violating your rental restrictions. So the first portion pertains to the lease itself. Leases must be in writing. They must incorporate the rules and regulations and governing documents into the lease so that they're binding on both the tenant and the landlord. The term of the lease must be at least 1 year. That's becoming more and more important today as you see Airbnbs pop up throughout the state. Most governing documents limit leases to at least 1 year, which is what yours currently have. We're reiterating that and ensuring that nobody has less than 1 year lease. The next section addresses remedies in the event of a default. So what that means is that if you have a tenant that moves into the community and they don't treat the community and the neighbors like we would want them to, and they are violating your governing documents, maybe they're causing a nuisance, maybe they're building something in the back they're not permitted to do, whatever it may be. Without language like this, what's being proposed, all that the association could do is pursue the owner, because the owner has a contract with the association. Everybody here does. When you buy into a community association, you agree in the governing documents to become subject to all of the rules and regulations and penalties if you violate them. So without language authorizing the association to pursue a tenant directly, it's simply the owner that becomes liable. So here what's being proposed is authorizing the association to go after the tenant directly if the landlord refuses to do so. So if you've got a tenant that's causing problems, maybe dealing drugs, maybe causing a nuisance, whatever it may be, if that were to happen, we would notify the landlord, you need to deal with your tenant. And if you don't do it, the association is now authorized to do it on your behalf and charge you back all of the costs incurred. I strongly suggest incorporating this language into all governing documents. It's important to have just to maintain your community as you want to have it maintained. The next provision, let's get around a little bit.
Excuse me, Mike, are you gonna?
Oh, please, yeah, go ahead.
Are you gonna ask a question?
Absolutely,
Like
yeah.
last night?
Yep.
So again, I just want everybody to know that last night I brought this up. Our current documents already have a provision for a minimum of a 1-year lease.
Correct.
So this is redundant. Okay, so why are we doing something that's redundant?
So, as I mentioned earlier, what we're proposing to do is delete what you currently have and put this language in. It's a little cleaner. I think it reads a little easier, and it would be, we're ensuring it's going to be enforceable if you ever find yourself in court.
So is the new language going to be exactly as this is written?
As what's written in the document that will be, they've been mailed out already? Yeah, so you have a copy of it.
So how come we are not talking about exactly what's going to be written? Even last night, we didn't talk about these paragraphs in the back. We only talked about the little box.
So this particular one is fairly long, several pages long, single spaced.
So it's in the back.
Yeah, but we need to know. I mean, we need transparency.
Yeah, I'm trying to just give a summary of it. I can go through and read it would just take us an extra.
But a lot of
half
people
hour.
didn't have this last night. There was so much ambiguity.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, this was given to every home in the views. Yes, it was hand delivered to every home.
It was in the views.
in the views. It was added to everyone. Okay, it's also available here. It's also available in front of you. There's also copies out by the desk if someone doesn't have it. And if anyone wants a copy, we have them. The point here is, if you would like, and you can spend plenty of time reading all the wording. I'm holding up, this is just with that one thing that Elaine is referring to. If you would like to read that before you vote, of course we would like you to. We're doing a synopsis here. We're not reading through the whole thing. But if someone wants the whole thing read, or you read it and you have a question for the lawyer is available. So I think it's a moot point because all of the wording has been distributed and is available. Do you have a copy, Elaine?
It's not a moot
Do you
point.
have a copy of it? Yes. Yes? I asked you a question, that's all.
Anybody else? I'm glad you're saying this. This is normal.
Yeah,
So the
well,
answer is yes.
I'm gonna say,
Yes, I have
okay,
a
so
copy.
maybe you should read it.
So, excuse me, maybe you should not assume that I didn't. My point is, we have to be transparent, correct, Mike? Mr.
So if
Fuller?
there's a particular question that you have on the language, be happy to talk about it.
My particular question is, why wasn't the lengthy paragraphs even mentioned last night? Mike is implying that we all have it, which I can tell you, as you heard, we didn't all have it. And I can also tell you that I found many of these in the street that blew out of people's mailboxes. So we can't assume that everybody got it when we don't know that for a fact. But I just want people to fully understand what it is you're proposing.
Okay, so if anybody has any particular questions, I think you all have a copy of it in front of you. Feel free to reach out, and then I'll be happy to try to address it the best I can. Yeah?
I think you already told us a difference by saying that in the old language, you could only go to the landlord, but in the new language, you can go to the tenant, and that's already a difference.
Right, and I'll go through a couple more differences as well. So right now, your governing documents require that owners own and reside in their property for 3 years prior to leasing out, being eligible to lease out their property. This is being reinstituted into here. I don't know if you currently have the exclusion for heirs, but what this is proposing is that if somebody were to pass away and their heirs took over ownership of the property, that they would be able to rent out that property without needing to reside in the unit for 3 years and own it for 3 years. And honestly, the reason for that is anybody at any age is authorized to purchase in the community. The age restriction pertains to residing in the community. So if you have an heir that's below the age of 55, that becomes the owner of the unit, but they want to move in perhaps in a certain amount of years, or if the place is underwater and they want to try to rent it out for a couple years so that they can sell it, this would provide them an opportunity to do so. But it's a 3-year, for everybody else, it's 3 years that you would have to own and reside on the property before being eligible to lease it out.
Excuse me, Michael.
Yes,
There's state law on that already, and I don't,
I'm familiar, yeah.
okay.
And
so
federal
then-
law as well.
Okay, so then, if that's the truth, I mean, that is the truth, why would we need to spell that out? If it's
So
already
the
put-
heir language is not in the state or federal law, nor is a seasoning provision. That's what we call it when you have to own and reside in the unit for a particular amount of time.
So what is the state and federal law on an heir who's underage?
It's not addressed. The question is, what's the federal and state law where it's an heir that is underage? That is not addressed. I'll back up. So in America, it is illegal. It's illegal to discriminate by age when it comes to housing. All right. There is a carve out, and that's under the Federal Civil Rights Act. There's a carve out called the Housing for Older Persons Act. That was created to permit 55 and older communities, and also 62 and older communities in limited circumstances. But for 55 and older communities, there's a bunch of criteria that associations such as yours have to maintain in order to still be able to discriminate by age. And generally speaking, what it talks about is what percentage of people must be over the age of 55 when they reside in the community. But it doesn't talk about ownership. Anybody can own the property. It's residing to ensure that you can maintain your ability to restrict by age. So this provision is not addressed in the federal or state law. It coincides with it, doesn't conflict with it, and it does provide some protections to associations to, say, disenfranchise investor owners from purchasing in your community.
So, it's my understanding that an heir who is not 55 can live in a 55 or older if they inherit the home.
So unless your governing documents permit that, it is not permitted by state or federal law. It's not addressed. All right. So I will talk about one of the big changes here that's being proposed to rental restrictions. This is by far the largest one. Pertains to a cap on the percentage or number of rentals permitted in the association at any given time. So right now there is no cap. So people can buy and they can rent out after they've resided in the unit for at least 3 years. And then the community can continue to allow more and more leasing. What is being proposed is a cap on the number of units that can be leased. What the board and committees wanted to introduce is a 2% cap. We talked about it last night. It's my understanding that we're at or below 2% rentals now. Is that correct? We're below?
Below.
Way below.
Yes, we're below.
Okay. So right now you're way below, around 6, something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the number of rentals you currently have. So this would cap it at 2%, which is what, 16, 18?
18.52.
Okay, so about 18 units would be the cap at any given time that rentals would be permissible. If you do hit that 18 unit number, and number 19 comes along and they want to rent out their unit, they would have to apply for a leasing permit, notify management, show that they've resided in the unit for 3 years, they've owned it for 3 years, they otherwise comply with all the criteria, and then they would essentially wait in line until somebody stopped leasing their unit, in which case one would open up, and then they would be next in line. All right. This provision, we represent quite a few communities in Ocean County. This language has been amended into governing documents in many communities, I would say, throughout Ocean County, especially in Monmouth County. If associations allow too large of a percentage of owners to lease units, aside from all the ancillary issues that could cause, one of the big ones is your insurance premiums. As viewed from the perspective as an insurer, you become a more risky community. So I would suggest to you it's a smart idea to get on top of this before it ever becomes an issue, and put a cap on the number of rentals, and you would never have to deal with that issue.
I have a question.
Sure.
Just to those there, historically, what's been the maximum of the number of units leased?
Historically here, 5 or 6 has been the number. The issue is historically, we had no wording in our restrictive laws to limit it. So we're not expecting tomorrow that number to go up, but why not be prepared like other communities to keep it as low as possible? I think last night Mike mentioned some communities try to hold the line at 0. Maybe not necessarily the wisest thing to do, but obviously between 0 and 2, all right, we're not saying 10%, but we're restricting it as low as, that makes sense.
Yeah, I know of at least 1 or 2 other communities in Ocean County that have instituted a 2% rental cap. And as Mike just pointed out, there's actually in New Jersey, I think it's a Supreme Court case. It's either a Supreme Court or an appellate division case, which is binding on all the courts in New Jersey, where a community association prohibited all rentals. Right? And of course, they get sued because somebody was renting out their property, and then sued. And Superior Court, they made it to the appellate division, and I think it made it to the Supreme Court. And the court ultimately held, when you purchased here, you purchased subject to your governing documents that could be amended. And here, the membership chose to amend your governing documents to take away the right to rent out your property, and the courts upheld the association's right to do that. So that's a good thing in case you're ever challenged. Sir?
Just to clarify, you say a person that's under 55 is allowed to buy here.
Correct.
They're not with you.
That's correct.
So there, somebody buys here, can you rent it right away?
So right now, the answer is no, because your governing documents currently state, which would be reiterated by this amendment, that you must own and reside in the unit for at least 3 years before being eligible to rent it out.
So if you have to leave it empty for 3 years,
So what if the unit sits empty for 3 years? Good question. We've actually litigated this issue in Ocean County, where the governing documents required ownership and residing, which is what yours also say. And the courts have enforced the restriction that the owner cannot just let it sit vacant for 3 years, but rather they would actually have to reside there. Again, the idea being that you're disenfranchising investor owners from coming in, LLCs coming in, buying units, and just renting them out, which can eventually change a community.
how would it work? I mean, the guy buys the house, he's 50 years old, he can't live in it, he can't rent it, what do you do with it?
Don't buy it. Don't buy it.
Not buy it? Yeah. I mean, I would say, all of your governing documents, all of your amendments, they are all recorded in the county clerk's office. Right? Before somebody were to purchase a unit, it would be in their best interest to take a look at what restrictions apply. Yeah?
The renter has to abide by the age restrictions, right?
Correct. It's the resident, so the renter, yeah. All right, I'll move on to the next amendment. So, stated as number 3 here. It's Article 3, Section 4F, as in Frank. This amendment pertains to certain restrictions that you have on building fences and walls and other improvements on your property. And right now it states that the Architectural Control Committee has the ability to create parameters and rules, but it's the board that the members elect, and the members ultimately make the final decision on the scope and extent of rules that would be permissible. So the way your governing documents currently read is that if somebody proposes a change to the Architectural Committee, the committee itself can make an exception to the rule that was authorized by the board. That's not typically how things would work. Usually, it's the board that you elect, and board members are directly accountable to the members, that would authorize an exception to a rule. So what's being proposed here is changing it from a committee that can authorize the exception to the board. So I'll read the sentence. It states, despite the above, it used to say committee, now it would say board, shall have the power to grant waivers from architectural design criteria and standards set forth in this paragraph, according to the procedures and subject to conditions as may be established by the board. I would suggest to you it's generally speaking the right thing to do, because again, the board members are accountable directly to the members, whereas committee members are appointed by the board, and they're not directly accountable to the owners. So it's the board that should be able to permit the exceptions. Any questions on that?
So where is that lengthy part that you just wrote? It's not in the handout that we were given.
I don't have that.
So transparency.
Number 3, it's in the front, very front.
Number 3 on page 1, it
No,
sounds
I
like.
understand that, but it's only the small version. Where's the long version that you just wrote?
It sounds like that was mailed out previously. Ma'am in the back, did you have a question?
So, will the art committee make the determination of the exception?
So that's the way it states now, is the art committee can make exceptions to the rules that the board instituted. Here it's saying no, if there's something that falls outside what would otherwise be permissible, the board would have to authorize that.
And would there be a shelf life decision as to how long the exception would be allowed?
So it would be for an individual basis. So if you wanted to put in a tree or something in the backyard, and that otherwise was not permissible, but you still wanted to do it, you can go to the architectural committee, submit an application, and it's outside of the parameters. The board can then make the final decision as to whether or not it would be permissible.
So would the board be deemed
that's a great question. And since we never had this clause in there before, not everything got to the board. So consequently, the committee members making the decision, committee members actually come and go.
Right.
The board has a 2-year term. So for the sake of having 5 board members look at it and decide whether an exception is to be made. And I'm going to use a very simple example, and I used this last night. You can't have a window air conditioner in your house. Can't have it. Everyone knows that rule. If your air conditioning broke today, and the air conditioning company can't get there for 3 days, the board can decide that you can put a window air conditioner in your house until the repair is done. That's a very simple example. Who wouldn't allow someone to cool off in the heat? So in that term, in terms of the parameter, it would be until your air conditioner is fixed. Now, there's probably a dozen examples that could come up that we don't even know about, but the board has to have the flexibility and the ruling to allow an exception like that. So I hope that clarifies it. So yeah, the board should have a uniform thing, but not every situation is the same exactly. So here's the thing, you elected the board, you guys elected the board, and the board is accountable to you. And the board will make determination when something falls out of the scope of normal. Who else would you rather have do it? You know, so that's kind of, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Sir?
I have a general question about this one in general, kind of following up on her point. For this number 3, for example, are the only changes to this Article 3, Section 4, etc., the items that you indicate that are indicated in the box in front of the sheet, or are there other changes to that particular clause that were not provided to us?
I do not have a copy of the sheet.
What's the question?
Are the only changes the ones that are set forth in the boxes in the sheet?
Yeah, just to explain this handout, the way we designed it, the first column is the section of the restrictive and protective covenants. This thick binder, that's being amended, okay? It tells you the section, the page number, and the booklet and everything. So we didn't want to include all of the language. So up on top in the heading it says, it represents the changes being proposed, and the page numbers reflect the location in the document where the entire section can be read. So if you wanted to read the entire section that's being amended, it's in the first column referred to with the page number. What we intend here was just to give an overview of what was changing. The only exception would be number 2, leasing, which was a brand new rewrite. So we included the entire rewrite because that was not available anywhere else but in this document. So that's why the lengthy section on the bottom and the last 2 pages is the brand new leasing section, which, like he stated earlier, includes a lot of language that was already in our leasing section. It was easier to rewrite the whole thing than try to make a million changes to a document, the current language. So that's why that was rewritten, and it's replacing what's in there. But everything else in bold is what the new language is compared to the old language. So just to go through the columns, the section of the document is referred to in the first column. The category of that section is the second column. The original language that's in the current restrictive and protective covenants is in the third column. The fourth column is the changes to that language in bold. And then the fifth column was sort of an intention to interpret, like you do on the state elections, the interpretive statement, when they're asking a public question or vote on a public question. Just give a high-level summary of what's being changed in plain English language rather than legal language. That was the intent. So hopefully it was clear. If not, this is the point of this meeting, to get all your questions answered and address it here.
So thank you. So in other words, there are no other changes that are being proposed for us to vote on other than that's on this piece.
And 2 of them have been struck today, which are the sponsors. So there's only 8.
Correct. And again, you'll receive a copy of all of the language that will be mailed out to everybody along with the ballot. Once it's finalized, approved, it's mailed out. Ma'am?
Me?
1, 2, or 3 days, you have to call the board. That's ridiculous. You have to go out and get your air conditioner and put it in the window. Why do we have to contact them? I wouldn't be having an air conditioner if I didn't need it.
Right, so you can use any other example, a tree, a shrub, something that you want to install in the yard that would otherwise not be permissible. And the Architectural Control Committee, once you submit your application, falls outside what they would otherwise be able to approve. And now it just defers to the board to make an exception.
I will agree with you. I don't wish this on anyone. If your air conditioning broke today, you go to Walmart, buy a wall air conditioner, put it in. No one is going to say you can't do that. All right. So it's in the realm. It was just an example. So another example might be similar to what they're saying. When it comes to you being able to breathe, you breathe. You get your air conditioner. But that's an example just that I used. There's probably some other ones. But please, you just get your air conditioner and we'll figure it out later.
Yes, I agree with you completely as far as an air conditioning. But as far as it goes with a tree, we have had it all these years, never to put a tree in without the art committee.
Yes.
What would make it now that it's going to change, that you're going to have a triple tree and not a single tree?
Hi.
Hi.
In regards to trees,
Yes.
I had been with the Architectural Committee for 13 years. In regards to trees, most of our properties are the same dimensions, but some properties are different sizes. And the only tree that the Architectural Committee is involved with is your shade tree. Rule of thumb, 6 foot away from the Belgian block in the street. When we allowed Verizon Fios to put utility lines in, certain properties that were smaller, it was determined by the ARC committee that folks did not have to replace the tree. Now that was a determination not completely done by a member of the ARC committee or the chairman of the committee. We asked, number one, that the utility company gave us a letter in writing stating that putting a new tree in would be a detriment and possible problems to utility lines or gas lines. We also asked through the years that a particular landscaper or a tree company that was going to remove the tree also give us that in writing. And that was the difference between a homeowner not having to put back a tree. It all depends on, there's certain circumstances that are involved. I will go one step further with the air conditioning. It was the way we did things for all of those years. If anyone had called me and said that their air conditioning was broken, it was immediately told to them, go get another air conditioner, put the architectural app in afterwards. It's an emergency situation. You don't have to call, if you feel better calling someone on the board, but you're within your rights to feel comfortable. There's no one here going to say, you can't put that air conditioner in, particularly on a day like today. So there's common sense that has to be, that comes into play.
You are referring to past years that we as seniors in this development has always abided with. We have always abided with it.
I agree 100% with you.
We called up ARC, or we got the paper from the desk, and we did what we had to do. Now, it's gonna change and other people are doing what they want. That's another problem.
You're right. And when other people are doing things that they shouldn't do and you see that, that's your right as a homeowner to please put the letter of concern in and report it. And please sign it. I don't want to get off track here, but please sign it, because if you don't, it goes nowhere. I hope that helps you out a little bit.
Michael, I have the bylaws here. I'm on Article 3, Section 4, page 19. I don't find it in here. Steve, maybe you could show me where this is, page 19?
Not the bylaws.
So this is not the bylaws.
It's a covenant.
These are the covenants.
It's a covenant. First section.
So I'm in there, I'm on the page 19, it's 19 of
All the way
59.
at the bottom left, does it say restated and amended declaration, or does it say bylaws?
Page 19 of 59, there's no Article 3, there's no Section 4. I went to both sections.
Excuse me, Elaine.
It's possible that you're looking at the wrong document.
I know.
Is there a question?
So if there's no questions, I'll move on to the next one.
It is a question, where is it in here? I don't see it.
On the bottom, does it say declaration?
All right, so in the meantime, we'll move on to the next proposed amendment. So this is Declaration, Article 3, Section 4I. So this is proposing to allow the board to make rules and regulations and permit temporary and permanent structures on lots. So I'll read what it states now and then what the proposed language is. It currently states that no structure of a temporary character, trailer, tent, shack, garage, barn, storage shed, whether manufactured or constructed, or any other building shall be built or used on any lot at any time, either temporarily or permanently. Period, it ends there. This is adding, except as expressly permitted by the board and subject to rules and regulations which the board may promulgate from time to time. In other words, it authorizes the board to make an exception and allow permanent or temporary structures on a unit's lot. A gazebo, for example, saka, however you pronounce that, temporarily placed in the back area.
For religious reasons.
Sure, that would be for religious reasons, otherwise a gazebo for, year-round or perhaps temporary use. Does anybody have a question on that?
Yeah, would you mind repeating that? I'm very sorry.
So if you look on your handout,
Yep.
this was number 4 at the bottom of page 1, the structures. And the bold and underlined portion is what is proposed to be added.
Okay, so last night I had asked what exactly the definition of this was, and I was not given a definition.
The definition of what?
What the change is, what are the structures that they're referring to? Because for religious reasons, we already have provisions for that.
So, right, we talked about this last night. So what had happened in the past was that the board had passed a resolution to authorize temporary structures. The problem, and I think that was the right thing to do, but the issue that you have is that your declaration of restrictive covenants currently prohibit that from happening. So I would make the argument that it was still the right thing to do because it would be worth your time, energy, and money to seek to avoid some sort of challenge if the board were to not allow temporary religious structures. But it is a best practice for sure to incorporate this language into your declaration of restrictive covenants to authorize the board in the first place to make those rules. Does that make sense?
So the change would only be for religious purposes, because last night people were believing that they could now put a shed up.
So it is not only for religious purposes. It is
So it
not
could be for any
only for
structure.
religious purposes.
Temporary.
It's a temporary or permanent structure. The board can now make exceptions if this passes, if somebody were to submit an application.
And the board would make that rule,
That's correct, the board makes that determination, yep,
and them alone.
correct. All right, I'll move on to the next one. So this is Declaration, Article 3, Section 4J. So this pertains to signs and sign placement. After your governing documents were written, there had been several cases in New Jersey, one of which made it to the New Jersey Supreme Court, where the court talked about signs, in particular political signs, and restrictions that are enforceable and permissible on behalf of an association to limit or otherwise restrict somebody's right to place signs and express their political opinions in front of their unit or in the unit window. So what this amendment is seeking to do is to coincide with the New Jersey Supreme Court cases where they've authorized associations to institute time, place, and manner restrictions on signs. So in other words, the content of the sign cannot be reviewed, but rather the size, the placement, when you can have it, so on and so forth. So right now, it states that no sign of any kind shall be displayed for public view on any lot except for one for sale or for rent sign, etc., etc. This is seeking to change it to state no sign of any kind shall be displayed to the public view on any lot except for up to 2 signs, 24 inches by 24 inches maximum size, applied to the inside of a window, and this is all going to be added, and up to 1 sign, 12 inches by 12 inches maximum size, placed in the ARC-approved flower shrub bed adjacent to the main entry portico. This provision shall be subject to the right of the board to promulgate additional regulations on the time, place, and/or manner of such display. In other words, seeking to comply with the New Jersey Supreme Court cases. Any questions on the signs?
So we currently have this being violated under the auspices of the real estate committee. They're
Home
encouraging.
sales, not real estate.
Home sales committee,
Thank you.
excuse me. And they're currently encouraging agents to place open house signs with balloons on the property. So it would be in violation of our current bylaws or declaration.
So I can chime in on this one. First off, the idea about having a sign in your flower bed, does anyone here have an alarm system? Do you have a sign that says you have an alarm system?
No.
But if you did, it was illegal, but that was silly. If you have an alarm system and you want to put a sign out to scare people away, that's fine. But presently, the way that our laws were written, you weren't able to do that. Now that was allowed because it just didn't make any sense. Okay, so that's one thing. Secondly, we're talking about a sign, not something that's only up for 4 hours. Temporary signage is being dealt with. And I'm sorry to say, if you don't like that someone puts a sign that says open house for 4 hours, okay, fill out a concern sheet. Because we, the board, see nothing wrong with a 4-hour sign going up so that people don't get lost in our community to go to an open house. So a sign being up for 4 hours, you can take it to the extent that you feel it is a violation, but the board has taken the position it's to make other people's life a little easier to find the open house for 4 hours. At the conclusion of the open house, the sign comes down.
All right, I'll move,
Just one question regarding political signs. Will the board put in writing the amount of time that political signs are allowed? How many days prior to an election? How many days after the election?
So, right, that's a really good question. And as you can imagine, this entire political sign issue is really gray and unclear as to what sorts of restrictions are too much and which are permissible. So as we were talking about quite a bit last night, political signs have become less of a support of a particular candidate and more of a statement about the person putting it out there. So at some point, signs become less political and more of a statement about who a person is. Somebody can make the argument that it's not actually supporting XYZ candidate, but rather I'm just explaining to my neighbors and neighborhood, my thoughts and beliefs. So if they make that argument successfully, then there would be no time restriction on when it would be out there, versus if it's supporting a particular candidate for an election coming up in November, the board can certainly institute certain restrictions on that. So I'm sure, I suspect anyway, that we're going to see several cases in New Jersey over the next several months addressing this issue and probably providing a little more clarity for us. Ma'am?
How do the people come in for this open house? through the security gate? They don't.
Defer over to you.
Because we haven't had this, as far
So
as I know.
Alyssa is going to describe the process that she works in the office.
Open houses must be requested at least by the Monday before the Sunday that the open house is being held. That gets approved. Then we notify the gatehouse. The real estate agent provides all of their information, card, directions, and when they come in, they say that they're coming for that open house. And that's how they get
How
let in.
many cars are coming in?
Yeah, that's what the gatehouse does. They track every single car that they let in and have an identification.
All right, I'll move on to the next one. This is listed as number 6. So this is Declaration Article 3, Section 4K. This one's pretty straightforward. There was a typographical error. It's just fixing the typographical error. All pets must be kept on a, it used to say leash. You meant to say leash. So this would just cross that off, put leash with a maximum length of 6 feet. Easy enough. All right, the next one, number 7, Declaration Article 3, Section 4N. This provision pertains to what we were speaking about earlier, the air conditioning units. So the following paragraph would now be added into the governing documents. Notwithstanding the above, the board may, from time to time, approve other forms of air conditioning systems pursuant to such rules and regulations as may be adopted by the board for that purpose. And Mike, if you want to provide the background, like you did last time on that?
Yes, so we all have our houses that have central air. 28 years ago, that was the sole source of air conditioning. In this day and age, recent technology, not that recent, let's say 8 years ago, split AC units are available. So as an example, if I have a Lake Ridge 1 and I have a 3-season room, which is nothing more than a tin can, you really can't use it unless you put a split air conditioning unit in there. And then you can heat it, and you can cool it, and it can be used. So split air conditioning units are the latest technology out there, and we didn't want to limit the wording to say split AC units, Mitsubishi, blah, 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 because I don't know in 2 or 3 years from now if there's going to be another solution. So if your central air conditioning cannot adequately cool your house, a split system can be added so that you can cool your house properly. Bless you. And we did have, as an example, in a Lake Ridge 2, we did have that you can have a split air conditioning unit to cool the upstairs, because if anyone has a Lake Ridge 2, it's hard to keep that cool. So this is just going with the times with the latest technology, being able to add a split AC unit or a different type of air conditioning and not a window unit. So it doesn't have to be a central system. Okay?
Just a simple clarification, this, the language that's here, that's being added, is added below the paragraph that's on the left. No deletion of anything.
Right, so currently it states your governing documents, I'll read the sections, it's only 2 sentences. It says that each owner, tenant, or occupant of the lot shall be prohibited from utilizing or installing air conditioning units through the exterior modifications of the dwellings or through open windows or window openings. The only air conditioning units that will be permitted are those units which are considered central in nature and installed in a slab outside of the actual residential structure. This additional language would then be added, stating, notwithstanding the above, the board may from time to time, etc., approve certain air conditioning units.
You may, whoever's updated during the voting, I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it, you may want to just indicate that this additional language comes right below the paragraph that existed.
Excuse me, Mike.
Ma'am?
I'm sorry, but back to 6, when it says pets, and you were making a typo correction. There's no language about poop bags and cleaning up behind your pet?
So not in your declaration of restrictive covenants. That's typically something, a rule that the board would pass.
Okay, is it in our rule?
that room, it now becomes a taxable space.
Okay. That's a good point. Once somebody puts heat and AC into a room, it now becomes part of the taxable square footage of the.
Yes, and when you have to apply to the township for the air conditioning permit, they now understand that. That's part of the responsibility of the air conditioning system to get the permit, and then it becomes legal space, as Elaine said. So that's something that's taken as part of the process of adding the split air conditioning unit.
All right, I'll move on to, looks like our second to last one. All right, this is Declaration Article 3, Section 4T. I'll read what it currently states, only 1 sentence. No artificial plants, grass, plants, other artificial vegetation, or alternative ground cover such as decorative stone, impervious material, gravel, or other similar landscaping material shall be placed or maintained upon the exterior portion of any lot. That's what it currently states. It's being proposed, be revised to state no gravel, artificial grass, artificial plants, or other artificial vegetation shall be placed or maintained upon the exterior portion of any lot. Does anybody have any questions on that?
I don't have a question, I just have a statement
Okay.
that I brought up last night. So this came about because ARC had granted 12 permits to, one of them was an ARC member, to allow decorative stone and an impervious material, which was in violation of this. And when I brought it to the attention of Mike, I was screamed at, I was demolished, I was for 12 minutes and 48 seconds, and now they're switching it to allow it to try to cover up their mistake. So now they want us to vote to approve their mistake and also change the landscape of the community, making houses no longer equal to each other, because if one person puts the stones in, their home will now have a higher value than the house next to it, in addition to the probably maybe 8 to 10, it's at least $8,000 cost to do it. And the maintenance on the rocks is far higher than if there were no rocks.
If they wanna do it, let them do it.
No, I know, but it's changing, it's altering the landscape, which is
Different
what.
day is improving it.
But that's right, and then it's not improving the house next door.
So,
Because we live, because we live.
That's the
No. Michael, maybe you can explain where we live in a
can
community
I,
environment.
since you mentioned my name, I'm gonna respond. And Elaine is correct. And I'll tell you that a mistake was made. The board made a mistake. And Elaine, I'm sorry, people do make mistakes, maybe not all people, but we, ARC, and the board made a mistake. ARC felt that they could change the law, but as Elaine brought up, it goes back to our restrictive rules. The second we understood that we made a mistake, we stopped and said no further houses can put stone until we fix our restrictive rules. Now here's the thing, everyone gets to vote on it. It's not one person's opinion. If you like stone, vote yes. If you don't like stone, vote no. The idea that you're increasing the value of your house, if I redo my roof, my driveway, my windows, my bathrooms, my kitchen, I increase the value of my house. Am I concerned that my neighbor didn't do that? No. So yes, Elaine is correct. You're increasing the value of the house. You're not devaluing the house next to you. You're increasing the value of your house. And quite honestly, I can do what I want with my house on the interior, and this is now extending that. So now we have 12 people that have stone.
Well,
What do we, well, that's what was approved by ARC.
I've heard that there's 26
Okay.
or 30.
Well, I don't think it's 30, and I'm gonna say playing telephone, maybe it's a number between 12 and 20. Let's for argument's sake, all right. But at this point, how would we take that away? Should we have the HOA pay for the removal of all that stone?
That's the answer.
Well, unless the community votes that they like stone. And in that situation, the majority rules. If people like stone, fine. If people don't like stone, two things can be done. It can either be grandfathered in, or the HOA will pay for the removal, and that will be reflected in our HOA fees. Okay, so that's the two ways to go. So I'm going to say this, yes, we're trying to fix the problem that happened because a mistake was made. Yes, a mistake was made. Going back to the restrictive documents, trying to fix it there, as I described in the beginning, will filter down. If the community likes stones, fine.
What my point is, thank you, Michael, but my point is that the board, your duties and responsibilities are to keep the community equal. We will now be unequal. What you do inside your house.
Again, Elaine, you're making a point that it's not making any sense to me. I'm going to ask for clarification. If I fix my house up, my house has more value, whether it's the inside or the outside. What does that have to do with anyone else?
Michael, if you would be respectful and let me finish, I will be able to prove my point.
Go.
The outside of your home, your roof, we all have roofs, okay? Stones, we all do not have stones. So a home with stones would have more value than a home without a stone. And so we would no longer be equal, okay? And Mr. Poole, if you can help Michael with the purpose of a board to keep us all equal.
No, that's not. It's not to keep everyone equal.
So equality is not the goal, but aesthetic continuity is.
So it will.
So you want to maintain the aesthetics in the community.
It will not maintain the aesthetics of the community.
And if more than, if more than a third of the people that participate in the vote agree with you, then
I understand that, but this is what the board is charged with doing. So their fiduciary responsibility is to us, correct?
to the community,
To
correct?
the community. So that would alter their fiduciary responsibility if they're now allowing the change of a value per home.
I don't agree with that, but that is certainly your opinion, and you are free to state your opinion.
If I could, I think there's a fundamental ambiguity here. There are different terms that are being used here, and I don't think we're at all clear on the distinction among the terms. There's gravel, there's stone, and there's what we've come to know as river rock. Now, what are we talking about? Gravel poses a certain danger of lawnmowers throwing the gravel hither and yon and perhaps damaging the adjoining properties. So gravel is small. Stone, Gibraltar is a stone. Then there's river rock, which are very large, 4-inch rocks. So I think a great deal of the argument here is about different things and different people's understanding. So I would say we need to keep the no gravel, but be more specific as to the size of those, quote, stones that we are inclined to permit. So I think one of the issues here is a misunderstanding as to the terminology being used in the revision.
So last night,
Go ahead.
Okay, you were trying to tell, if you live in a house, like you say, you can fix the inside of, but then if you wanna fix the outside, you shouldn't be allowed to fix your outside of, because it might not make the other person's house look bad. If I wanna buy stones and put around my trees, I should be able to do that if I'm willing to keep it up. That's my house. I'm the one that's responsible for keeping it up and make sure that when I do decide to sell, that the value of my house will bring me my money back. But we're not comparing, how you gonna sit here and compare people's, if I do this to my house and you don't do that to yours, I'm bringing the value down on your house. That's not the way it's supposed to work.
I think the board agrees with that.
That's not the point.
That's the point.
That's exactly.
I don't have a question, I just would like
I
to
get it.
make a
I understand.
suggestion to move on. I think we're getting into individual likes and dislikes, and I think the purpose of this meeting is to clarify it. For me, it's clarified. What I like, I'm not gonna share with you, but I'd like to move on, only because I have to leave soon.
Can I just touch on the fact it's not just for looks in regards to the rocks of the fire amendment code? A lot of people said, well, it's just flammable, that happens. It does. I physically have seen it with my own eyes. It's very sad, but anyways, just take that into account as well. But again, personal opinions. Everybody, that's what the vote is for.
Just so everybody understands, excluding myself, can you tell us exactly what a stone is, so people who do it do the correct thing? Very good.
Yeah, as far as I know, and actually Phil Weiner would be a better person because he's running the art committee now, but I think they do have samples of rock, the size and the color that you will be able to use. And just as a side, we all will have the ability in a week to vote whether you want stone, whether you want to aesthetically clean up your property. Instead of arguing about this is going to change somebody else's property, this is going to do this, we're all going to vote on this thing. And if it goes through, the people have spoken. That's what you homeowners want. It's not what the board is going to try to push on you or do anything along those lines. I really believe that with the vote on all of these topics,
You have a choice.
you do have a choice.
That's what you're getting. You're getting the choice, whether you want stone or you want mulch.
Correct.
It's your decision to make.
Correct.
You have that choice now.
Correct.
That's what you're voting for, the choice.
Exactly. So vote with what you feel will make your property look better, will appeal. And someday you may want to sell your property and you want to try to get the most money that you can for it.
All right, we'll move on to, will be the last one here. For number 9, we'll skip over. That one's off of it won't be included on the ballot. It just pertains to the sponsor rights that Mike had mentioned earlier. They're just no longer relevant. So number 10, the last one, Declaration Article 3, Section 4CC, and this is proposing to add this language, and it pertains to solicitation and limiting solicitation. So it will state, occupants of lots who are agents for outside commercial interests shall not solicit in person or by telephone, but shall use the mails, provided, however, that no solicitation shall be made in the name of or refer to the association without the express written permission of the board having first been obtained. The board shall further have the power to promulgate regulations regarding solicitation within the association, whether for commercial interests or otherwise.
Please explain that.
Sure, it would give the board, it gives solicitation to mailings, and gives the board the right to authorize the use of Lake Ridge Homeowners Associations on solicitations.
I don't understand that.
Okay.
Can you explain it so that I can understand it?
The language is right there. We just read it. You can, if you have any questions on it in particular, let me know.
Well, I'm a realtor and I do mailings, so does that mean I can't do mailings?
So it specifically states that mailings are permissible.
Okay, well, that's what I'm saying, they could not be. So then what solicitation are they specifically talking about that we would, give me an example of why I would go to the board and ask for permission to do a solicitation.
So this is prohibiting solicitation in person, or door-to-door solicitation, telephone solicitation when somebody comes and if they get a copy of the directory, just go through and make telephone calls. to all the owners, that would be prohibited.
And going door to door.
Door to door, correct. Would be prohibited.
We have stickers that says no solicitation.
The no knock stickers?
Yes.
Yeah, that's under a municipal code, that's very specific.
We have the no-knock policy, we already have that.
It's not in the restrictive documents, and
Correct.
we're adding it to the restrictive documents. What has been in play has not had the support of the restrictive documents. That's all we're doing.
Now it does.
Yeah, again, in order for the board to promulgate rules, right, you still have to have the initial authority in either the bylaws or the declaration. This is clarifying the association's authority for these particular issues, solicitation now, for example.
So just making sure I understand one piece of this. So with this text here, the board, of course, has the power to allow, to make a rule that says, well, such and such a commercial entity could, associate whatever is named the association, fine. They still would not have the power to allow that entity to advertise door to door or by telephone per the first sentence, so that's correct? So
That's
there's a
correct.
limit as to what can be, rules
That's
that can be created, okay.
All right, everybody, well, I think that's it. Thank you for your time. This was all of the amendments, so you should be receiving the mailings.
I would like to say something. Thank you for the opportunity. Can I have that mic, please? I'd like the opportunity to be at this meeting. My name is Pinchetta Burke. Ladies and gentlemen that you're leaving, you might be some of the people in my paper. I have been living here for 28 years, and I am strongly opposed to having a board member be allowed to make decisions on my resident behalf without them having had any prior experience or knowledge of our Lake Ridge community rules and regulations. And also all have lived by the appreciation of all these years. As a pioneer of Lake Ridge community, I am confident that I am speaking on behalf of the seniors living here in this development. No one should be elected to the board without a complete community vote. Thank you for your time.